Your voice making a difference.
This is Breakfast with Bongani Bingwa.
Oh, here we go again, right? Cyprus has detected a new variant of the coronavirus dubbed Deltacron. It has a similar genetic background to the Delta variant coupled with mutations from Omicron. According to one Dr. Leondios Kostrikis, the head of the Laboratory of Biotechnology and Molecular Virology at the University of Cyprus, of the samples that they took, most of them were of people who were hospitalized due to the virus. And it's quite possible, of course, the new strain hasn't been found elsewhere. Should we be worried? To explain all of this, we're joined by Professor Salim Abdool Karim, the infectious diseases epidemiologist and director of CAPRISA. Prof, always a pleasure to chat to you. Thank you for your time this morning.
A very good morning. Happy New Year, Bongani, and to all of the listeners.
Yes, indeed, the same to you. Now, Prof, the layperson's reaction to this is to say, oh gosh, not another one, right? But I suppose given the coexistence of various strains, and in this case, Delta and Omicron, this was to be expected.
Absolutely. I think we have now come to better understand this virus. And that the reality is that this virus is going to continue mutating in different ways. We can expect that we are going to see many new variants. But let me give you a simple example. When we had the Delta variant, it wasn't one particular Delta only. There were about 36 different types of Delta. They were all what we call quasi-species. They are minor variations on it. And occasionally there'll be a significant difference. So we should be expecting that we are going to see many of these different variations in the virus.
The Cyprus officials say the mutation seems higher amongst hospitalized patients. Is that an indication this combo will be more serious perhaps than Omicron?
I would very much doubt it. I think the reason they are saying that they're largely among hospitalized patients is because they only looked in hospitalized patients. If they actually go into the community and look for this virus, they're likely to find more. Now, the current Omicron variant that has just over 50 different mutations actually has several of Delta's mutations in it. So the version of the virus that they've been describing in Cyprus has fewer mutations because it's got largely Delta, but it has some of the Omicron mutations. So it is probably quite similar to Omicron in terms of how it's going to behave in all likelihood.
So, I mean, it doesn't seem what they're telling us has been detected elsewhere, but I imagine if it indeed, is what they say it is, it's a matter of time. And would that be then a cause for concern for us?
No, I wouldn't be overly concerned. I think the key issue that, we need to establish before we can be entirely confident is to establish whether this particular virus in Cyprus is neutralized by our vaccine antibodies and by antibodies that people with natural Omicron and Delta infections, can they just simply kill this virus? Because if they do, then it would be pretty easy to prevent this virus from spreading because natural past infection and vaccines would prevent it from spreading.
Prof, we're almost 2 years into this thing now. Should we be taking a different approach, particularly when it comes to restrictions? I'm thinking ahead of the start of the new school year, for example. I mean, are the unions justified in saying, for example, that rotational learning as a measure to contain the spread of this within the schooling system is no longer a good idea? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it would be incorrect to say that, we need a different response now. Actually, we've had an evolving response. That response has been systematically changing in response to two things. The first is how has our knowledge grown? How do we better understand this virus and what of our measures work and what don't work? And the second, and importantly, is how the virus is changing. And the virus has been systematically changing, and this is now the fifth variant of concern. Now that we are looking at Omicron, we have a clearer understanding that Omicron is a much less severe infection. Why do we know that? Because we have seen it in our own hospitals, that even though we've had many cases, we haven't had that many admissions, and most of our patients that were admitted were not severe. We understand that this particular variant, Omicron, doesn't really grow that well in lung cells. It's not that much of a lung infection, but it grows very well in the cells in the nose. So that's why it spreads so fast, but doesn't cause severe disease where you need oxygenation. Now, in response to a less severe infection, we need to change our response. And part of that change is an evolutionary one. It's where we now re-look at the way in which we use restrictions, we minimize those, and we focus more on our vaccine strategies, combined with select few public health strategies, particularly indoor masking as one example, keeping the size of gatherings at some controlled level so that, that we don't get, outbreaks of new variants when they arise. So it's just those simple measures that would help us cope. And schools is a good example that in the Omicron situation, there's really very little need to close schools or interfere with the way schools function, because this virus is quite mild in teachers, and even if it spreads very rapidly with very mild infections, and we overcome it quite quickly. So all of those combine to minimize our restrictions now.
And not least, of course, because teachers and all learners over the age of 12 should be vaccinated at this stage. Professor Salim Abdool Karim, always appreciate your time. Infectious diseases epidemiologist and director of CAPRISA there on the line. And no doubt the Minister of Basic Education, Angie Motshekga, will be making some pronouncements on that.